All right. So I have Leith from the band Vaultry with me today. Um, I won't ask you how you got your name because I read the background on that,
Yeah, yeah.
which
Well,
was
it's readily available,
I was
and
gonna
it's a
say.
dumb story.
Well, I mean, people love video games, so maybe it's not as dumb as you think. Maybe
That's
people
true.
who are super into Fallout will be like, "Man, that's
This band,
awesome."
yeah. Funny story though. That is how I got into a lot of the music I got into. I used to watch like fucking like Helsing AMVs and stuff with Godsmack in it when I was like 12.
Hey man,
It was
we all have that phase.
yeah.
I still unapologetically like all that stuff. Actually, I think on the way back from Deftones the other night, I threw on Godsmack randomly. It was just like,
Oh,
oh
right
fuck it,
on, right
whatever.
on. Cool.
So how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. How about yourself?
It's hot here in Michigan.
Uh, it's windy here.
Oh, I'm
Lot,
jealous. It's like 90.
yeah.
It was like 90 degrees. It was almost 80 degrees this morning when I woke up at like a quarter to seven.
Well, I'm always worried about shit blowing off my balcony because I have like hanging plants and stuff, and there
Uh,
was a windstorm the other day, and it was like
if I knew more about botany, I could probably make a better joke, but I'll just leave it at that.
yeah, for sure.
So the band Vaultry, it's not your band per se. You came to the band.
Well, it's my band in the sense that I was there at the formation of Vaultry. There was a band before Vaultry
Okay,
called Tears and Counting that I was not a part of.
okay. One of the back interviews I had read kind of made it seem
Yeah, it's
like
probably a
there
little
was.
unclear.
Yeah, I was gonna say made it seem like Vaultry was a band had maybe kind of like the
Hmm.
classic thing that a lot of bands go through when there's member changes at such an early in the infancy stages where it's more. There was somebody else that wasn't quite off the ground. Maybe there was an EP or some songs getting ready to be tracked, and then, hey, our singer's gone. Would you like to hop in and fill the void of that since you were a sweet singer in another band we all played with?
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
so I guess that is sort of probably the same story. Just that band was done, and then the new entity with you and it became Vaultry.
Yeah, that's basically what happened. I mean, with their old bands, they were kind of they'd been a band for about 4 years before I even met them, and they had you know one LP out, and they were working and working and working, trying to get things happening. But unfortunately, Clayton, the singer, just decided it was not something he really wanted to be a part of anymore. So they were like, "Oh, well, what should we do? Should we continue doing what we're doing right now with 2 Years and Counting, or should we look elsewhere for inspiration?" So I met Brad at my grocery store that I used to work at, and he came in every day. He was a regular. Um, and
Having
then
worked in
he
a
was
grocery store, I definitely know that there are people who come into them every day, which is kind of
Yeah,
weird.
well, he works at the restaurant right around the
Mm.
corner from it, so
Okay, they
he
probably
would
needed
come in to get.
supplies and stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So he came in and he was like, "Oh man, things are going a little rough right now. Our singer just quit." And I was like, "Oh, I always sing. Can I audition?" So I uh, I sent him some demos from one of my older projects, and then they liked it, and we started jamming, and I did a formal audition, and yeah, and then now we're 3 years deep into Vaultry. So it's been quite the shift in what we've been doing, with especially with Chase passing away and swapping out a few more members. It's really been like a huge process of kind of form the band into something that really works well.
Now, with kind of doing my own homework and going back and listening to basically Eulogy, which has just recently come out, I think within
Hmm.
the last month or two.
It came out in January.
Okay, so a little time.
Yeah, yeah.
But then before that, there was another EP, Coven.
Hmm.
Um, and then listening to it, it sounds like you guys are. There's a very familiar sound, I would say, akin to a lot of the stuff that was kind of coming out in the early 2000s, kind of like with
Yeah,
like a
yeah.
lot of the sort of Taking It Back Sundays and stuff like that, where it's like you have little influences of like post-hardcore and kind of
Hmm.
some of like the indie music scene sort of.
Yeah.
Was is that a? I'm starting to notice it come back around now, but it's kind of a different take on it, where like there's more double bass. There's actually kind of sort of breakdowns in this music.
Hmm.
So everything's kind of getting a little bit more nuanced in a newer way than it used to be.
Yeah.
Was that always the band's sound, like from like the band that used to be? Like, was that always kind of your
No,
sound,
they
or?
were kind of like Parkway Drive, As They Lay Dying sort of stuff.
So more
Like
metalcore screaming.
more metalcore.
Okay.
That which is why Coven still is kind of metalcore-ish, just because it was kind of the last little remnants of that. And as we work towards, the sounds we really liked, I think with the response we got from Walls when we released Walls through Dreambound, we really saw, what people wanted in our music and what we really liked about our music. So it was easier to find kind of a template for where we were going to move forward. And the album intentionally, like Eulogy, intentionally has a lot of early 2000s influence in it, just because Chase, who the album's written about, was really, really into like early 2000s Taking Back Sunday post hardcore pop punk sort of stuff.
Right.
Like this basically the Equal Vision catalog before the modern era.
Right.
And so we've we really decided that early on when we were writing it that we wanted to have that sort of pop punk early 2000s influence into the sound to make it more nostalgic and to make it like sort of sound like the time when Chase would have grown up, so it reflected around the kind of music and like who he was as a person.
For those not familiar with who Chase was and what happened to him, because we are referring to him in the past tense, do you want to kind of give the background on that so we can kind of go more into talking about Eulogy?
Yeah, for sure. So about 2 months after I joined the band, Chase was diagnosed, or he was one of the first guitar players from Tears and Counting, and he was diagnosed with terminal lymphoma. And over the course of his couple last years fighting it, we started having to push things back, and we didn't really manage to get out as much music as we wanted. And we got to December of 2015, and Chase was going into permanent hospice. So I got him over before he was shipped over, managed to write about 4 songs with him, and then we managed to get one back one more time when he was in hospice to write another song with him. So we wrote Hospice in the hospice with him. And then about a week after that, he passed away. And we spent the next few months after that just refining the album, trying to reconcile our grief and keep going forward. And then we managed to meet Damien, who is our new guitar player, and he was really positive support for the band and like really helped us, keep focused when we were all feeling like maybe we couldn't do this, like it was going to be just too much for us to keep going as a band after losing someone so special to us. But luckily, Damien's positive support really kept us going, and we managed to keep on schedule. We got into the studio in May to record a single that we wrote with Damien called No Victory, which was kind of like the precursor to Eulogy, where it was like where we were kind of like doing like a little taster sound of what the album was going to sound like.
Right.
It's a lot more upbeat than Eulogy. Eulogy, I would say, is a lot more somber, but that's just comes with the territory. And then and we got into recording Eulogy in September, and then we released it in January. But we were writing it over the course of like a year and a bit. So
something I hadn't really seen in researching how this Eulogy EP came about and in the process of writing it. You had just said that you had gotten with Chase to write some of the songs. Was that the music, or were any of the lyrics of anything? Like, did Chase write any of the lyrics to any of the other songs, or just more of the music as a whole?
It was mostly just the instrumentals that we wrote with them. I had an entire LP's worth of lyrics that I wrote initially, but after having a conversation with him when he was in hospice, he convinced me to rewrite all my lyrics to be about his life and what he'd gone through, and to make it a story about his life and make the album his legacy. And so I couldn't say no. Like, it was, I knew it was exactly what I had to do, and I'm really glad I did it, because I feel like writing an album that would have just been like a bunch of random songs, really wouldn't have felt as special as writing, the songs we wrote for this and writing the lyrics that I wrote for this. But yeah, he wrote a considerable amount of guitar with me, and then we kind of worked around it and built on it. So it was mostly just like the underlying structure of about 5 of the tracks of the 10.
When coming up with the lyrics for this, how, I don't know if I want to use the word hard or putting pressure on or both. How is it to, and no pun intended, how is it to basically eulogize someone's life in a song form where you kind of have to be cognizant of, song arrangement, structure, melodies, so forth, while trying to do the justice that you want to give the material. There we go. That's what
You're
I'm looking
definitely a
for.
lot more. Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, you're definitely a lot more hard on it. Like, you definitely get down on yourself a lot more, and like, is this really that good? And you have to kind of step back and look at, like, are you really writing exactly what you feel needs to be written? But at the same time, it kind of just happens, like writing the lyrics, the words just sort of come to you as you feel them. The nice thing about lyrics and poetry is that, like, you could write 1,000 words, and maybe in certain circumstances only 20 mean something to you, but those 20 will stand out to you, and those are the ones that you pick. Like, it's not really like as difficult and to write them as it was to perform them. Like, having to perform these songs all the time is like, oh god. I've like, I love this album, and I love the process and how we managed to keep Chase alive through this. But I'm gonna be honest, it's gonna be nice to get some of these songs out of our repertoire, because I just, like, there's some songs that, like, I have a hard time getting through performing.
I was gonna say, is this gonna be one of those things where, upon the touring cycle of this album being done, are you gonna retire a lot of these songs, and just because of
I don't
the
know.
emotional toll that it kind of takes on you, as well as I'm assuming the rest of the band performing these?
We'll probably play the singles
Right.
after. I mean, I kind of want to move forward with what we're doing next versus, stick to this. Like, I do want to keep Chase alive, and I do want to continue playing a lot of these songs and keep his voice heard. But I really think that especially with the music climate now, that you have to keep moving forward, and you have to keep releasing new music, or people lose interest in your band. It takes a very special kind of person to be able to revisit, and a very special kind of album to be able to revisit it year after year after year. And I don't know if Eulogy's that. I hope it is. I hope it feels as connected to this album as it was intended for. But I definitely just want to move forward and keep Chase's story going, even if he's not the subject of the music.
With losing a member, and obviously a founding member of kind of the entity as it's shifted from the old band into what Vaultry became,
Yeah.
was there ever a point where you maybe thought about maybe not continuing on as Vaultry, or continuing on playing music as a whole? Like, I mean, there are
Yeah.
instances like, with 18 Visions, like, basically recently just putting out their new record and saying, like, Nick's not in the band anymore, but so we're not going to ever have a bass player. We're going to, like, kind of leave his rig set up every time. We're just going to run bass tracks because we don't want to replace him. Like, that's kind of a very interesting take on the fact that, they went through the same thing that you guys have, like losing a member of the band. But it's a different route that I've typically seen a band go, like, where they're like, just, we're going to have bass tracks, and there's never going to be replacing this person, like,
Yeah.
there's so many instances where that's not been the case. But there's a lot of bands that are also like, we're not going to continue on anymore, we're going to change the band name, or just not continue on at all.
Yeah. I think it's hard to say. Everybody's different, and the kind of group of people you're working with really depends. We're a band that really focuses on progress and focuses on moving forward, and that's kind of what Eulogy was. We almost didn't have another guitar player. We just we didn't want to pull a fill-in. We wanted to get somebody that we could depend on, and somebody that wouldn't replace Chase, but would definitely just be another brother to the family. And I think that's what we found. With 18 Visions, I mean, it's kind of like I would assume that they'd been a band long enough with their bass player in it that they'd build up that connection, and they just like they'd known him for 20 plus years, that sort of thing. Whereas like there really was no replacing him. Whereas like um, with Chase, um, we knew that Chase he asked us if something ever happened to him or he couldn't play to he had a short list of people he wanted to get to fill his shoes. So we wanted to, we wanted to do what was best for the group as a whole, and then do what Chase wanted, because his wishes sort of came first. It superseded what we wanted to do.
Right. I guess it was just more in the vein of with the style change kind of over the last couple of EPs or albums you put out, and with this happening and getting someone else in and kind of changing the sound again with this new member, it's just as we were saying before we hit record, like, I was looking at the comments and people were like, oh, where'd the screaming go? And I was like, are you referring to, because like the stuff I had found on Coven, I didn't find too much screaming really, nor a dramatic shift in the sound to me. But it was one of those where I was like, oh, I could, like, listening to this style of music for a better part of a decade now, I could see where, like, oh, this, you could have screaming here, and this is where I'd expect it to be. Or, like, something akin to, like, a Hawthorne Heights kind of thing, where it's like, okay, like, here's the person singing, here's the scream going on in the background, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Like, the formula is
formula.
there. Yeah. So I was kind of surprised that I couldn't find anything that had a drastically different sound. But I'm interested, because you said that you're already looking, like, writing newer stuff now, so I'm interested to see where the next album goes when you're not kind of writing a concept record.
Well, I still am kind of. It's just going to be more fictional.
Okay.
It's not going to be non-fictional. The new material we're working on is a lot more experimental. It's kind of, I don't know. That's such a, like, loose, ambiguous term to say, like,
it's your heaviest and your softest is the softest, and it's the best record you've ever put out.
Yeah. Well, it's like we're working with a lot more electronica than we were on the last two records, and it's just because I'm a electronic producer at heart. I used to produce electronica for years, and I like the broadness of it, and that you're not limited by what instruments you're playing and what amp you're using. It's you have this well of sounds and spectrums that you can use to pull into your music to make it not necessarily more interesting, but feel more authentic to creativity. Like, because with Coven, it's not a record that I typically recommend if people are trying to check out my band, go listen to, obviously, because it's not the newest thing anymore. But
right.
I felt like the record was extremely rushed, not in recording time because it took almost a year to come out, but in writing it, I feel like we rushed it a lot, and I wish we'd taken a lot more time to refine the sounds we had and to work with more stuff like Walls, and to put aside the sort of metalcore stuff like Ligeia and Misanthropic and Owls. Like, I really wanted to do something more ambient and, like, more interesting, which I got to do with Eulogy. But with Eulogy, we were kind of like, we want to also make it more accessible. So we were like, well, pop punk is something that Chase really dug, and I took vocal lessons right after we released Coven, because I couldn't stand working with my screams anymore. It was just it's not that it was too difficult. It just, like, because I bounce a lot in my range, so I was finding it difficult to scream and balance singing really high, and then also keeping my voice fresh. So I definitely moved to singing over comfort. Plus, I also don't really listen to a lot of metalcore screamo type music anymore. I'm definitely more into, like, chill stuff. So it's kind of, I don't know. I didn't want to, like, bum fans out, but it was definitely it was definitely a logistics decision.
Well, I was gonna say, I mean, we come from a time now where you're seeing a lot of those older bands. I mean, shit, even going back to, like, 18 Visions, like, they went from a straight up kind of more just straight hardcore kind of band into like a weird, I wouldn't even call it quite metalcore, because it was just more singing than anything. So I mean, like, you're seeing, like, a lot of that, or even, like, Dallas Green from Alexis on Fire, going from like what they were into City and Color and finding
Yeah.
more success doing that. I don't think that. I think we're of an age now where people understand that people are influenced by completely different things now, and just because you like, you're in a metal band, chances are most of the time people I know that are in metal bands don't listen to metal really. They're like, I hear it all the time. I'm either around it at shows, listening to it for 4 to 5 hours,
Some
and so
people
on
really
and so
dig it,
forth.
though.
That it's like, yeah, we know for sure. But it's
Yeah.
it's funny because I feel like growing up, when you used to look at some of these other bands, it was always a thing where people would be like, oh, I like this band, this band, this band, and it's all like things in the same realm. And I never really. I was always like, oh, I guess like if you like this thing, this is all you can like, which seems kind of narrow-minded, but I guess whatever. That's that person. And now it seems like over the last like handful of years, like you're seeing people just be like, nah, man, I really like folk and I really like country, and I'm gonna start doing that. And people delving into other realms. So I mean, it's not. I don't think it's that weird that like. I actually think it's kind of a bit selfish of fans to want a band to just stay in their proverbial lane. Like,
I think it's juvenile.
Yeah,
it's like I thought we had a pretty juvenile sound in Coven. Like, it was not super interesting or cutting edge, or we weren't really trying anything like out of our comfort zone. And I think the more we try to write songs out of our comfort zone, it really expands the sonic palette of what we're doing. And especially with this new record we're writing, a lot of the songs are like sort of have the same sort of strong structure as Eulogy, where it's like kind of the more like higher tempo sort of half-timey stuff, and then like a little bit of punk parts. But like mostly we're trying to see like what kind of other music we could fuse into it without it sounding like 12-Foot Ninja.
I actually just saw them recently and was kind of
I'm a huge fan of them.
I never had heard about them.
They're great.
It was very interesting to see that. Kind of like when I saw like Enter Shikari and I had never seen or heard them, and I was like, wow, this is interesting.
The thing about both those bands is like their stylistic fusion is very obvious. It's not very subtle.
No.
Like when they do genre changes in songs, it's like Iris Aldebaran once. It hits you like a ton of bricks.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to figure out how we can like merge the two genres of like what we're doing now with what we're gonna do later, and sort of make them more cohesive and feel like a more unique sound. And I mean, everybody says that about their record. Everybody says they're doing something different, but the proof will be in the pudding when it comes out, and see if people actually think it's unique or if people just think that we're derivative. I don't know. We'll figure it out.
What is the scene like up where you're at in the what is it, British
Victoria?
Victoria?
British Columbia. It depends where you live. We live on an island, so it's pretty like limited because there's not a lot of bands, because there's not a lot of people living on the island. Victoria has a lot of indie bands, a lot of sort of reggae ska type bands, just like West Coast sort of shit. Like people like this, like groovin music. And then Vancouver has a pretty diverse scene. It's sort of between it's hard to say. It's like metal and then also like indie rock and stuff. Would you be able to just cut this out for a second? Somebody's at my door. I'll be right back.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. It was my dad. He's dropping off some stuff for me for tour. But he must have forgot that I was in an interview today. So
that's fine.
The perks of doing podcasts from home.
Yeah, no, that's pretty much all I do. I've actually kind of been slowing down because there was like weeks where I'd do like 3 or 4 a week, and then I was just like overwhelmed, and my wife was hating it, like that I was like locking myself in this room and then editing and doing all that. So it's like I'll cut back a little bit.
I started doing like my photo editing and work stuff on the couch when my girlfriend is there, and we'll put on like an anime or something, but like a dubbed one because I can't focus and read subtitles and stuff. But like we'll put on like something like mind numbing on like Dragon Ball Z or something, and just like watching in the background.
Yeah, I do that when she's watching her Real Housewives of whatever place
Oh
here.
God.
Oh, she loves terrible TV. So
That's fair.
a lot of times I'll just bring my headphones out, and I mean that's like one time she was watching that, and I had to. I got an advance copy of that Misery Signals documentary coming out at the end of the month.
Oh, word.
And
Nice.
was doing an interview with the dude who did it, and so she was watching her crap. I was watching my thing on my laptop and writing some notes, and she was like, kind of bummed, and I was like, well, it's either I do this by myself, or we can at least like hang out near each other and occupy the same space, like being productive with what the limited time we all have.
Definitely. All right, let's get back on record, though.
Yeah, but so you. Because it's kind of interesting, like, I'm very close to Canada, living here in Michigan. It's only a few hours away.
Oh, yeah, because you're right by Ontario.
Yeah, I'm in Grand Rapids, so we're about, I think, like 3 or 4 hours from the border, depending on traffic and all that. But it's one of those things where I'm very aware of bigger tours that go through, and I'm always kind of like, man, Canada gets really sweet tours, but then I always constantly see people bitch that, like, there's no Canadian tours on other tours. So I kind of just not really ever been aware of the scene that's there, and even when talking with Fallon from Kitty recently, I kind of talked about, was there really a music scene up there, and if so, like, kind of what was it? Because the bands that kind of have come out of Canada as a whole are kind of far and few between over the last, I'd say, like, decade or so.
It's
like bigger
just
anyway.
It's because it's so expensive to tour from Canada, because Canada in itself is a huge country with not a lot of cities in between.
Yeah.
So touring Canada is quite expensive, and then the border costs you about $450 a person to get a visa so that you can make money while you're on tour. And the prices go up and up and up and things, and like going to Europe's expensive. I mean, it's probably the cheapest route for most Canadian bands, to be honest, is to tour Europe, because it's the same cost as Americans coming through. But
don't they? Yeah. I was gonna say, don't they also tax your merch when you're going through the border?
They might. I might also tax her. It's probably just better to order your merch
from a Canadian shop, and then, or vice versa, then come in and get your merch. Yeah.
Yeah.
We
do that. We do that for our. We're doing that for our tour merch this time. I dropped it off at a friend's house in Vancouver, got it sent there. So we're gonna pick it up on our first date of our tour, and then we don't have to take it on the ferry with us because it's just extra shit in the van.
Right. What does tour look like for you guys? I mean, you said kind of touring Canada is very long drives and so forth. And have you noticed over the last few years, like, a kind of a scene growing across and building your brand?
Apparently Toronto has Ottawa, and all the cities on Ontario have booming, like, post-hardcore scenes, emo scenes. Like, I see a new band that just ripped off La Dispute, like, every week and a half.
That band, I don't. It's so weird. They're from here, and it's very weird that people. I still consider them a local band, even though I know they're not. They haven't been for a long time, but they're still just that band that, like, used to play the coffee shop, like when the band I was in was playing like another place, and it's like, well, everyone's gone because La Dispute's playing a cover set like next door. Oh shit! All right. So it's one of those things, like, when I hear other people talk about La Dispute and, like, how stoked they are, and I'm like, oh yeah, people are aware of this band outside of people from here in Michigan. Like,
they're like one of my favorite. They're one of my favorite bands. I'm not saying that barb out of contempt for them. I absolutely adore Jordan Drewer and the gang.
No, I was gonna say they've definitely done their thing and been very successful at it over the last. Shit.
If you have a way for me to get in contact with him so that I can tell him how cool I think he is,
I haven't.
Let me know.
I haven't spoken to any of those dudes probably in like 8 years at least.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, they're busy.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like I said, we were playing a show at a place, and then literally you just, like, watch the whole room clear out, and it was like, what's going on? And then someone's like, oh, Lost View's playing covers at like like in a small, like, maybe 100 cap room.
Jesus.
And they were going by a completely different name and played like 3 different cover sets or whatever. And then, like, the next day, I don't remember who it was that I ran into, but they were at a friend's house, and they were like, oh, this is so-and-so, and, like, officially met them. And then I was like, hey, thanks for taking all of our people.
Huh.
But it's still, like I said, it's interesting when there are bands that get to that level that are from your area, and you're just like, wow, people know about them. That's weird. They're still just like, kind of a local band to me.
Well, it's like when people know about, like, Mother or Hot Heat from here.
Yeah.
It's the same sort of deal. I mean, they're both from Victoria-ish. I think Mother's from Quadra Island, which is, like, way up by Campbell River, which is, like, way up on the island. It's all a bunch of, like, tiny towns. But yeah, I mean, Alexis on Fire is another huge name. Like
Yeah.
they got giant and they're from Toronto, but like it's few and far between just because the scene in the States is just so much bigger, and there's so many record labels that only want to invest in American artists because it's cheaper. And then getting Canadian artists to play the United States is very expensive. So I really hope over the next few years we can work out something with the States to lessen the cost of musicians' visas, because it's just, or to have a better, easier grants for it from the Canadian government, because it's the reason that Canadian music is going to die out, because it's just too expensive.
I thought I had recently heard on a different podcast with a different Canadian artist. I thought that there was, speaking of the grants and stuff, they made it seem like there's, and maybe this is what they were speaking to, and just didn't really elaborate too well, or I didn't get it, but I was kind of under the assumption that like the government helps out some of the bands be able to do such things. They do. Is it very limited amount to who can get such grants and so forth, or
you have to apply and you have to have a certain amount of information readily available and large documents written out. It's a very lengthy process to apply for grants. A lot of people hire professional grant writers to help them get grants.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's a very bureaucratic process. So for a band that tries to do everything DIY, it's very helpful if you can get money from the government. But a lot of Canadian artists that are supported by grants are a very select few, and they're in a very centric sort of pool in terms of genre and style. Like Canada picks artists that are very Canadiana to. When I'm sure it'd be the same if America had grants. They pick artists that represented the ideals of the American people.
I didn't know if it was
it's just in there.
Okay, I was gonna say I wasn't sure if it was something more akin to not necessarily making back the money, but to where they knew that like the money was being invested in something that was going to reach a certain level, obviously. So then that way, I guess that kind of speaks more to your like putting like the Canadian kind of stamp on it and being very Canadian. But I think it's an interesting thing, and I wish, actually, I think other countries do it, and I think America is one of the few, it seems, that does not in any way, shape, or form. I mean, it just kind of sucks that it's apparently like some of our programs here to help people that goes to some people and not others that may be more deserving or whatever.
Well, the biggest problem with the United States is that you guys just can't get behind socialism. That's the nice thing about a lot of other countries that have this sort of funding and support from the government, is because they support socialism.
Well, everyone said they were going to move recently, so it's funny that whenever
that'll never happen.
I was to say, when shit hits the fan here, apparently everyone wants to move to Canada, but then no one wants to take on any of the Canadian things to help make us
the ideals.
I've always thought that was weird, just as a whole, that people don't do that. It's like, well, look at Canada, or look at these places that have whatever it is that you want out of your government, and then it just turns into this thing where it's like, well, in order to do that, like, there's other things that have to come with it, and people are like, well, I don't want that, and it's like, well, you can't just kind of cherry pick the things you want. Like, you can't. There's a reason that these things work, and it's because of these other things. I wish
the kind of people. Oh, sorry. I was gonna say, well, the kind of people that say that sort of shit are like the people who believe that Gavin McGinnis sketch about him being Canadian is reality and not fictional or hyperbolic. Like it's everyone thinks that we're a bunch of hosers, the kind of people that are like, oh, I'm gonna move to Canada, but
I love the dance.
Yeah, well, it's like everybody had said that, and there was a bunch of people who said that, and then they found out that gay marriage has been legal here for like, oh god, it's like 2006 or something like that, something like way back, and they're like, oh, I'm not gonna move there with those queers.
Yeah.
It's just like, it's the kind of people that say that sort of shit are just really dumb.
Out of curiosity, because I had read, and sorry to bring this kind of go backwards as opposed to going forward with the conversation, totally. But I was gonna say, I kind of had wondered, because in the like your EPK press kit kind of thing, it talked about how Chasen was transgendered, and I had wondered, and obviously there was some of that in the lyrics for Eulogy, because I mean that is a part of his life.
Yeah, huge part.
Obviously.
Yeah.
I'm saying it as I was saying, I was like, oh, I guess that I'm downplaying it, even though it like it wasn't a big part, but
well,
I was gonna
here's
say,
the thing about
go ahead.
here's the thing about being transgendered. Uh, the somewhat usually the most people who go through transitional surgery and through the full transitioning
Right.
with changing your name, your birth certificate, your driver's license, et cetera, et cetera. Most people don't want to think back to their
Right.
transitioning. They just want to move forward. That's the whole point of it. It's transitional.
Right.
Uh, Most people don't want that part of their, and it is important. It's one of the defining moments of their life. But
Right.
a lot of people just don't want it brought up because it's not important and they don't like thinking about it because it was a horribly painful time for them.
Right.
Most people deal with huge mental illness when they go through it because of the drastic change in hormones and surgery trauma. There's a reason that there's such a high suicide rate with transgendered people, and I think that there's just not enough empathy for it from a lot of people, especially from people who think that this whole thing was about bathroom rights. Like it's
Yeah.
after being in a band with someone who went through that experience for so long and like it never really coming up. Like I didn't even know until I found out he had cancer. Like I got all that information at the same time.
Wow.
It was just kind of one of those things, like.
I mean, at the same time, it's not.
Yeah.
It's not important. But I mean, I had wondered.
It is and it isn't.
It's
It's kind of ambiguous.
I was gonna say it's one of those things where, just like anything, really, if you don't make a big deal about it, it's not a big deal. Like, but it is a big deal to the person who had to go through that. What I was gonna say, and I had kind of wondered because, like I said, having a lot of friends in bands, I have. Like there was a friend of mine that when they went and did a tour in I think Tennessee, like many 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 years ago. Alfonso is a like black Latino-y kind of looking guy. Like he kind of is a mix of different races, and he got beat up out after one of their shows, and kind of seeing that shit in music scene as a whole, and being aware of it, even with the thing with Mina Caputo from Life of Agony, at this point going through the becoming a woman now, or
Laura Jane Grace.
Yep, I was gonna say. It's starting to become a thing that people are more aware of and understand that it doesn't change the music, doesn't change any of these things about the band that they love, but it's still sometimes like these instances kind of remind me that people aren't as accepting of change as I am or as I wish people were. But did you guys ever go through?
It's the same kind of people that we were talking about earlier. The kind of people that'll never change. That just want things to be like them because it makes it easier for them to grasp the world around them.
Did you guys ever experience any hate, I guess, for lack of a better term?
Transphobia?
Yeah. No. I mean, I guess if you didn't know until kind of toward the very end, then maybe not a lot of the fans knew, but it was one of those things that, like I said, with it being so omnipresent in the press kit, that I kind of wondered if the transition had happened at some point between the band and it kind of being more.
It was before that.
Okay. So that wasn't really any information that was available anywhere that I could find. So, but I was gonna say like if that was the case, like did you guys experience any issues during that? But I guess the answer to that is no. So awesome for you guys.
Sorry, cut out for a second.
Oh no, I was gonna say I guess at that point you guys didn't have experience any of the bullshit that usually comes along with that kind of stuff. So I mean, good for you guys.
We got like I mean it's awesome that like Chase didn't have to deal with any of that shit from fans because that would have been too much. But we did have some weird like kind of, I don't even know how to describe it. It was just a really weird experience. We had this one person, and I don't know if it was like a real account or a fake account, but it was like one of those sort of new age hippie sort of people followed our page, and they would like everything, and then they'd share our photos and like our music and say these really really weird long poems about our music and like about Chase had two souls and one soul and like all this like really like metaphysical sort of jargon that really didn't make any sense, and it was just like it was sort of disturbing. It's hard to describe. It was like I guess I'd say it's kind of like if you could go into a cult meeting and everybody's talking about the cult but you don't know anything about the cult,
right?
And you're just sort of like you feel very uneasy because
Yeah.
you're not sure
If
if
it's
that
good or
person
bad or
is
what's going on.
unstable
Yeah.
or yeah. Yeah, and it was just really bizarre, and like eventually we just blocked her off the page because we were like, it was like we were afraid it was gonna like, upset Chase's mom and stuff, and like that personally, I didn't want any more trauma to come to their family. So anytime something like that happens, we try to like snuff it out as soon as possible, because it's not that it's like we have thin skin. Like if somebody wanted to say that Eulogy was a bad record because they didn't like it, I wouldn't be offended and be like, oh, you're a bad person because it's about a dead person. But like at the same time, if someone wants to be like weird about it and like say things that are like almost disturbing and like sort of morbid about it, I would rather they just like not do it or take it somewhere else, because it's not. You have to understand that the Fraser family has gone through a lot, and it's not really something they want brought up a lot. It takes advantage of their grief.
Right. What is I mean, obviously you guys have played stuff off of Eulogy now for a handful of months.
Mm-hmm.
What was the CD release night like?
It was really good. We played one of the bigger clubs in Victoria. It's called District. It's a about 500 cap venue. There's about 250 people out, and we got our friends from Hawking and our local pals Aztec to come play with us. And yeah, it was just like, kind of built up as the evening went along. People started to funnel in, and we got our manager at the time to rig us a light show, because he does the lights at District. And it was really cool. He did some like awesome effects, and like it was all mood lit and stuff. And yeah, it was a great show. I loved it. It was great to see everybody come out and support. And we played the next night. We did a CD release in Vancouver, which is the big city in BC. And we got a couple of our other friends to come play with us, and we played at a small cafe. And we did the opposite, which was like we played a very intimate venue, and like maybe only had about 100 kids there, and it was great.
I guess I was wondering more like typically like a CD release, like your friends, family, like those will be the ones that it will come out. Mainly the family, I would say, will come out to see that, as opposed to being at every show, just because parents don't necessarily want to be out all late and at a loud show. So I didn't know if it was a very more emotionally charged evening, finally being able to play like these songs off this record in front of like
we played them like we played them months before. We started playing the set list off Eulogy like I think we started playing one or two songs from it but even before Chasen passed away.
Oh, okay.
And then our last few shows we played two new songs off Eulogy, and then but that was like their early versions and stuff, like when they still had like a little bit of screaming in them and stuff, and then kind of just worked its way out. And then we played like for the entire year leading up to when we recorded Eulogy, we didn't play a lot of shows, but we played like 4 or 5 of the songs off of Eulogy before they were even released. So we kind of just like swapped over a set list from Coven to play more of Eulogy even before it was out.
So at this point, you are about to embark on your. I'm trying to look up the ad mat for it real quick. Your Canadian tour. Looks like you're going to be gone for. Let me blow this up, if I can. There we go. I mean, it looks like you're going to be gone for almost a month between kind of hitting everywhere. What? I didn't see. It didn't look like you guys are taking anyone out with you. Are you just kind of doing the
we
one?
We were planning to originally, and then it just didn't work out. So we were like, yeah, we'll just do it ourselves. We don't want to give the idea that we are lone wolves by choice. we are lone wolves by circumstance. But yeah, no, we got lots of cool bands we're gonna play with. Actually, Toronto is going to be really fun. I get to play with my old roommate's band, Conversation, which will be really cool. And then, we're seeing some friends along the road, and that's going to be great to, reach out to all these people I haven't seen in months, since they've been touring out here or, opposite. It's going to, I think it'll be a lot of fun.
Is this one of the longer runs you've done consistently, like from start to finish?
This is our first tour.
Oh, it's the first tour.
This is our first.
Yeah,
okay. We've only done island tours. Yeah, we we unfortunately couldn't tour for about 2 years just because of Chase's health.
Okay.
So we were extremely limited to what we could do. But yeah, we as soon as this record was out, we were like, yeah, we got to tour it. It's time. So we started collaborating with Sleep Later Booking, and yeah, now we're working on getting some U.S. dates for next year, and working on Europe maybe a little bit later into next year as well. Maybe doing another U.S. run. It just depends on like if we're gonna record any singles this year, or if we're gonna do, if we're just gonna wait to do another full blown record. It just really depends on scheduling and what's available to us.
Do you find, because something I'm noticing a lot more in the music scene that I see here in the Midwest,
Mm-hmm.
it seems that a lot of bands are kind of doing what you're talking about doing and releasing like singles that then maybe will form an EP or a full length over the course of a year or over a year, and just kind of keep hitting new places, keep coming back wherever you can, and slowly building. Is that kind of the formula of what you're trying to do, you think, or would you rather kind of just hunker down, maybe have like one or two songs that are quote unquote newer, and then basically go to the studio, record a new EP, whatever, and then hit the road behind that where you have, five?
Yeah, I to be honest with you, unless it was like a weird experimental thing, I wouldn't do another EP. I think that doing EPs are like debut. Anything after that, it's just kind of like you should have just saved your budget to do a whole record.
It's so weird. I keep seeing, like I said, bands do this thing, and it's like, it seems like for every, and they're kind of a band that I keep talking about on this, but like again, it's very close to me here in Grand Rapids, but I Prevail. They did the tired and true thing that I see a lot of bands doing, which is, hey, here's our cover song. It's a popular song currently. However, the thing that they did, and they just recently did the Lead Singer Syndrome podcast with Shane Told, speaking of Canadian bands, from Silverstein, and
right.
My theory on it has kind of been proven to be true, where they did that to gain fans, to get people, to get eyes and ears on their band, but then they had a whole album basically done and ready to go as soon as that dropped, and then it was like, okay, like we're getting all these people to listen to our shit. Hey, now here's our record. Hey, now we're touring. Like, there was a full blown plan behind it, and then label interest and stuff like that to be able to help back it. But typically, I just see bands kind of doing this thing where it's like, oh, we put out a song, put out another song, put out another song. Hey, now we have an EP. You've already heard 3 out of the 6 tracks, whatever. And then in the time that it takes to lead up to said CD release show, and maybe a couple of shows to go around that, then all you hear about is the new songs we're recording. And it's like, so basically by the time you get the product that you're trying to put out, like that's new to most people, it's already old news to you, and you're already focused on the next thing. And like you said, like I feel like at that point, like if you're working on 4 songs and then you release it and you're doing an EP release and then you're gonna do some shows, and then like 5 months later you're gonna put out another 5 songs, it's like, just wait, because all it does to me is it make it seem like you don't give a shit about those old songs anymore. Like, well, that was what we were doing then, and I was so proud of those, but now here we are 5 months later, those songs suck. This is the new shit, and we're really proud about this. And it's like, I guess I just
it
can't
gets
take
a little bit excessive.
Yeah, it's like I can't take a band seriously when it seems like all they're doing is just trying to...
You're not the only person. The whole EP formula is not respected by a lot of major music outlets. Most people will only give a shit about LPs, and it's because records are coming back.
Yeah,
I think more than anything. As for us, yeah, we'll see what happens. I mean, like, I'd like to do a couple singles just to like kind of gauge the reaction to like what we want to do next. But at the same time, I just want to focus on doing some new stuff. I did a pretty like heavy record that I'm really proud of, and I'm really glad that I got to work on it and produce it. But I'm I'm all out of grief, Like I'm always gonna miss Chase, and I'm always gonna love the dude, and I think the world of him and his family, and it's just it's getting harder and harder for me to feel like that I can continue saying the messages of this album without sounding like just a plea for attention, like
right.
It's that's something I really worried about. when we released this record, I was really worried about people thinking that, our record was kind of just like a cry for attention, because we were right, given the circumstances, that we were trying to use the tragedy to our advantage to gain traction with fans. That it was a sob story on purpose.
I think.
Good. Yeah.
Well, I was going to say.
Yeah. You're probably going to say the exact same thing I'm going to say, so I'll let you go.
I was going to say, I mean, history has proven. I mean, I can think of like countless records that have come out where that has been the case. Like, and no one has felt that it was, for lack of a better term, a cash grab. I feel like it's obviously part of the grieving process. It's going to come out regardless. Mm-hmm. And even to the point, like, you're not, this huge band that, tours internationally and all that kind of stuff yet, but I still think for the fans that you have and the people who will find you, I mean, death is a thing that everyone will eventually experience, and everyone deals with it differently. And, thinking of something like, listening to the record, it kind of, like, having gone to, like I said earlier, I went and saw Deftones this past weekend, and in conjunction with listening to your record, gearing up like most of this past week, leading up to the show, I was reminded of a friend of mine that had passed away. Deftones being one of our mutually favorite bands, had memories of going to see him before he passed and stuff like that. And then even to the point of Deftones played up to the first chorus of the song Reverie off of Saturday Night Wrist, which is one of my favorite songs off that record and kind of reminds me of said person. So I mean, the concept of the record has kind of been heavy on my mind, and kind of, while not going through the exact same things, I mean, loss is loss, and any of your friends or people being taken before their time is never easy to deal with, and kind of being in that headspace myself over the last week, and then listening to your record, it wasn't like I purposely did that to myself to be like, oh, I need to get real like in this headspace to listen to this album, but I definitely think it gave me a greater appreciation to then kind of put myself in all of your collective shoes and kind of think about like how hard it would be to sit down and try to make something creative that, honors the person and does your friend justice and stuff like that. So I think that it's a record that, maybe it's like you kind of said, it's not for everybody, maybe. And maybe it'll be a record that will find people when they need it the most. And at that point, I think you can't really time that. Like it will be when it needs to be.
Yeah, I'm also one of those people that's never really satisfied. Like I always like to wet my teeth for more. But I think this record it came out. It needed to come out. I think it needed to be written. In terms of what we're gonna do later, what we're gonna keep, I don't know. It's kind of dependent on like what people want and what we want, and I think we'll discover more what we're looking for as we move more into the year. Especially now with like we got one new demo written that like it's like done and we know kind of where we're sitting at, but I don't think we'll really have an idea of like where we're going to be at with our new music until probably like October or November. I hope we can get some more stuff out though before the end of the year. I'd love to, show people that, we aren't like Tool. We're not going to take 10 years to release new songs. And we are living in a time now where novelty is the new thing. People want a new song. That's why YouTube channels where guys release, new songs every week are so popular, is because people just always want something new. But then where does the longevity go?
Right. No, I think that's where, being a vinyl guy myself, I think what you're saying is accurate. I think people want to be immersed in something and be not just like, oh, here's 2 songs and I'm done. Like to actually kind of sit with something and really feel it and take it in.
I think it definitely speaks more to the conservative mindset that people used to have to now, whereas like it's more fleeting, and carpe diem, live in the moment, is very popular idiom that people use to live their life by. YOLO, yeah, exactly. And it's like, and that speaks to every part of everybody's life. The people's lives are disposable. Like they pick up one thing, put it down 5 minutes later because they weren't insane at it, or they just got bored of it. And video games are no longer giant 60-hour epics. They're 5-minute movies. Or
Man.
they're 5-hour movies.
I just saw
With
the
minimal
new.
gameplay.
I was gonna say, I just saw the new Xbox got announced. I
Oh,
can't
did
wait.
it? Is
yeah.
it?
Well,
what's
it
it
was.
called?
It's just the Xbox X now. It was the Project Scorpio.
Oh yeah, that's Scorpio. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, but they apparently aren't going there. It's just gonna be the Xbox X coming out in November. Super amped.
The Suboxix.
Yes, it's as a friend of mine said after I posted about it, he was like, "It's a straight edge gaming system." And I was like,
It's
like,
the 4K one, right?
yeah. And then they're already doing everything right from what I heard, and people might already tune out during this because people don't like nerd talk, but I got excited because it was like, oh, it's 4K resolution, it's backwards compatible with the Xbox One, and you don't need to buy any new controllers or any new stuff. It uses all the stuff if you have an Xbox One.
Good.
So I was like, hey, I just saved myself hundreds of dollars.
You just need to buy yourself a 4K TV.
I already have one. We ended
Oh,
up,
well, there you
I was gonna say
go.
we ended up
you're ahead of the curve.
we did one of those Black Friday deals, and that TV took a shit on us pretty quickly. Like, some of the pixels in the bottom row went out, and then I was like, fuck that. Let's just get like a nice TV for a couple $100 more and know that it's not going to break. And then my Xbox looked amazing on that. And then I was like, when I saw that it was going to be 4K resolution straight up, and I was like, oh, this is going to be so good. I just don't know that I'll have $500 in November to drop on it.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, I'm a PC gamer, so it's kind of like I would love to have a PS4 just for some of the PS4 exclusive games because I'm big into JRPGs and stuff. But I would love to have some of them ported to PC so I wouldn't have to deal with buying another console. Because Final Fantasy 15 being the biggest, that is lame that it is a PS4 exclusive.
I think at this point, like, I'm more of a sports guy, but like, I think the last like handful of games I bought like that, because typically like sports games I can at least hold on to for a year. They hold their replayability. You can do a bunch of stuff, but it's like once you beat a campaign on something, you're like,
yeah, for sure,
I'm done. But I think like the last handful of games that I was like stoked on were like Dying Light, and which is okay. And the more I got into it, I was like, this game kind of sucks. But I'm hoping they do another Max Payne, because the Max Payne 3 was pretty rad, and that that took quite a while to get through, all things considered. But
that's true.
I just have a hard time paying like almost like 70, 80 bucks for a game.
Yeah,
I'm the
same way. I wait till shit goes on Humble Bundle. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, and then someone's like, oh, you gotta get all these like shooter games. I was like, why? So I can die in like fucking 5 seconds when I play online and get mad and like break all my shit? No.
I mean, Dark Souls has pretty good replayability. I like Dark Souls a lot.
I'm interested to see if they end up doing the crossover that they said they're gonna do with Xbox and PlayStation, to where you can like cross-platform play online.
Ooh, that would be cool. They probably only do it for a few games though, like Rocket League or something.
Yeah, I had also heard that they might start doing that. It might all be hearsay, but I had heard from a different podcast that there was talks that they might do that with some of the PC stuff too, like that are cross-platform. But...
yeah, share play or whatever.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, because they PlayStation 4 can do the share play now, where you like you can stream from somebody else's PS4 to your PS4, so you can play a game at 720p from your friend's PS4.
Yeah,
which is pretty cool.
Hopefully that leads to some better gaming, because pretty much with sports games too, it's just like any of those games, like someone figures out a way to cheat the system or whatever and run plays that they know you can't do anything to stop, and it's like, well, where's the fucking fun of that? It's like Tony Hawk when they started doing the dark slides to reset the grind meter. I was like, that's cheating. Like, if you can't hold your grind, then fucking get out of that trick and then just do some other stuff. Like, don't just stand in this like thing where you're getting like 3 million points because you keep dark sliding in the middle of something, and it's like, fucking assholes.
Yeah, well, it's weird too, because there's like certain games that are basically like unplayable for newbies now. Like Overwatch, if you want to play it beyond like
campaign
or casual, there's no campaign in Overwatch. It's just competitive play.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you want to play it outside of casual, it's like playing competitive is a clusterfuck. I stopped playing after a while because I couldn't stand people in competitive. They're just like so toxic and irritating to play with. So I've been getting into Hearthstone just because it's like a nice casual game you can play for like 10 minutes. just play like it's like Magic the Gathering, but I don't have to spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars on it.
Oh, it's not one of those like freemium games.
Well, it is a freemium game, but
Okay.
you only have to spend money on it if you want cards faster. If you're cool with playing over like 2 months to get something you could get in 5 minutes by paying, then it's like all about your patience.
Yeah, I have patience. People don't. It seems.
Yeah, no, I'm the same way. Yeah, I've definitely been also like rediscovering the classics a lot. Like I've been playing through Final Fantasy IX and stuff, and I was always a big fan of like Sonic for the Dreamcast because I grew up with the Dreamcast, and there were such great fighting games on that console. And like I feel like now it's like you can either play a 8-hour storybook with just cutscenes, or you can play like a competitive shooter, and that's basically your options for everything now. It's kind of sad.
Yeah, I've been thinking about going and getting my old Genesis from my parents' house.
Oh, you should.
Yeah, because
You still got your old games, so you could at least sell them for probably a lot right now.
I have like a shitload of games because I was one of those people that basically just bought games, and when I had Christmas or birthdays, I just asked for games. So it's like, I still have Eternal Champions. I have some of the games, like I still have my Sega CD. I still have like Sega CD games. So like,
that's crazy.
And like they're not like cracked cases. I can think of one game off the top of my head out of all of my games that has like a fucked up case. All the rest are like still have the instruction manual, still have everything like super good.
Oh yeah, they'd go for a ton then.
Yeah, I was telling my dad because he has another Sega in the house, and he's like, well, I'm gonna keep them, and I'm like, at least I would play them. Like they're just sitting in the basement doing nothing, and I was like, so at least if I could take them, either I could sell them and buy some cool shit, or like whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But
well, if you don't care about emulators, luckily Genesis and Sega CD are really easy to emulate. They don't take a lot of
those like new things for like not sort of like the NES Classic that came out, like the Slim or whatever.
Oh
but, like,
yeah,
they have those like
console thing.
Yeah, they have like one of those like small things that got like 80 games on it. But I'm like, other than just the convenience of having it and that it could hook up to an HD TV, other than that, it's like I literally, when I looked at the back of those games, my wife's like, "Oh, I like this game and this game and this game." I was like, I have like every single one of these games as the actual game, like sitting in my parents' house. And I was like, if there's like 80 games, I think I have at least 65 of these, like.
And the thing about it too is they don't work super well on those consoles. Like there's a little bit of lag.
Oh really?
And they are, some of them aren't emulated very well, or they're not like, it's not the same experience. There is something to be said about playing a game on an old console that you can't get from playing on emulators.
When I had bought a Xbox 360 from someone after mine red ringed on me, the one I bought had Perfect Dark on it, and I was like, holy shit! Ooh. I used to play this so much, and I was playing it. I was like, man, this is so hard. Like I was like, this isn't cool playing this on an Xbox controller. I wish it had like the Nintendo N64 controller. Yeah. And it just looked so choppy and weird. I was like, man, I spent so many like after school games, like days playing this with like my friends, like 4-player mode and stuff like that.
I always wondered why I sucked so hard at Street Fighter. And I found out that most people who actually play it professionally don't play with a controller. They play with like an arcade controller.
My dad, we have one of those for, I think we have like 2 or 3 for the Genesis, because we used to play Street Fighter and like Mortal Kombat and all that kind of stuff. So we got into that mode too for a while. And then you used to get like, I used to spend a shitload of money on those like controllers where it'd be like a 6-button controller, but then it'd have the buttons where you could like, if you hit it once, it's like hitting it 3 times or whatever. So like shit like that.
Oh, the turbo or whatever.
Yeah, I had one of those, and like people would be like, "What the fuck?" And I'm like, well, should have invested in your craft. But
oh man, that's funny.
Now that we're basically not talking about music at all.
Yeah, talking about video games.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they kind of go one and the same. I think a lot of people, I find that a lot of musicians, you know, when they're not on the road, like, are always playing video games and stuff, and just kind of, it's a different facet of being able to do stuff.
If it's any consolation, that's how I got into music.
You know, it's funny, because you had mentioned Desley dying earlier, or maybe I did.
Yeah. That's like way back at the beginning, yeah.
But what's funny about them is a friend of mine had actually made the comment about how if you just listen to the music, it almost sounds like it'd be like, and make it 8-bit, it'd almost be like more aggressive, like Castlevania music.
Oh, totally. It's the same with if you listen to like anime themes and stuff, and if you like just put the MIDI through stuff, it just sounds like Castlevania or fucking like Sonic the Hedgehog or something. Just like there's one song by Even like Meshuggah, now that
Yeah.
I think about it, like I listened to an 8-bit version of Meshuggah, and it definitely just sounds like Contra. It's
They some of these things that people do that know more about production, like there's a Meshuggah thing where they take the song Bleed, which I was telling a friend of mine the other day. I was like, you know what's crazy about that band is they can literally, like, the guitar riff on that is basically just one note being bent, like a half note being bent, and then
oh yeah,
slowly released. That's what that riff is. And I go, but to be able to
yeah,
play
it's
it
just
that locked in and that tight, like, and syncopated with everything else, like, it's so hard. And I go, but like the fact that like they literally wrote this like banger, like this 8 minute banger around like just bending one note, still shocks the hell out of me.
yeah.
And I was like, but then like someone did like a 25% slowed down version of it or whatever, and it just sounds so much more aggressive and brutal. You're just like, Jesus
It sounds
Christ.
yeah, it sounds like a deathcore band, like
Yeah.
just because it's like um without that like that tightness and that like that fast pace, it like loses all like its gent characteristics and just kind of becomes like Whitechapel or something.
Yeah.
Because his vocals in that I've heard that 25% speed down version, and they pitched it down too.
Yeah.
So his vocals just sound like Phil Bozeman or something.
So kind of wrapping this up, so because I gotta
Yeah.
get ready to cook dinner, and I'm sure you got something to do with your dad or whatever. But
Yeah.
where I always like to have people plug their socials. So where can people find you and or the band, whichever you would like to plug, or both?
Uh, if you want to visit our website at vaultrymusic.ca, you can find any of our social links at the bottom of the homepage. And then we're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We have a merch on Big Cartel, as vaultry.bigcartel.com. And yeah, you can find us on Spotify, on Apple Music. We're on iTunes. We're on Google Play. Like basically on every major music retailer you can find our music, and we're on YouTube on the Dreambound music channel. So
And then I always like to end the episode with a song. So what would you like me to play out the episode with, and maybe give a little backstory on it?
does that have to be one of my songs, or it could be any song?
You know, I had Mark from Atreyu on. He threw me a loop and was like, threw me for a loop. And
Oh
was
man,
like,
that's awesome.
he was like, "Oh, play Sturgill Simpson, Turtles All the Way Down." And I was like, "Oh, you're the first person that's not been like, play my shit." So no, it doesn't have to be yours. It could be whatever.
Shit, I wish I had had time to think about this. Play play me out, Johnny. I don't know, man. I'm gonna go the Mark route. Play me out to the happiest anime song you can think of. I don't know what it is.
I was gonna say since
Whatever sounds. Sorry.
I was gonna say I remember getting into anime when it was like still called Japanimation. It kind of dates myself.
Oh yeah, like early 90s.
Yeah, and I remember I almost said Bushido Blade. That was one of my favorite like PlayStation games.
Yeah, I remember that one.
Oh, fuck, what was the name of that movie? Ninja Scroll was one of my favorites. And then I remember seeing on Adult Swim's, well, before it was Adult Swim, it was just Cartoon Network. Super late when I still lived in Delaware, seeing this movie.
Oh yeah, like Cowboy Bebop. Oh,
Yeah.
Ninja Scroll.
Yeah, I saw Ninja Scroll,
Yeah.
but there was this movie I saw on Adults, or on I call it Adult Swim because that's basically what it turned into now. But it was some movie with this dude that looked like the Undertaker from wrestling, in the middle of like, and there's a cabin, and basically he was like saving this girl that was out in the cabin against this thing that was coming after her, I guess. But I don't remember what it was called, and I just remember it being like,
It's called Vampire Hunter D.
is it really?
It's Vampire Hunter. Yeah, it's Vampire Hunter D.
Really?
I'm pretty sure. If he looks like the. Did he wear a big hat?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really?
Vampire Hunter D.
I feel like it would have
Yeah.
been something completely different than that, because like that's a pretty easy thing to remember. But goes to
It
show-
might be something different, but like if it was like a pretty old anime, like it looked like kind of old, like 80s sort of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, it came
Yeah,
out
then
around the
it-
same time, around like the time that like Ninja Scroll came out here in the States, like around then,
Yeah.
and like Akira.
Yeah, I'm guaranteed it's probably Vampire Hunter D. That's like one of the first ones that really came over. Like, my video store that I used to go to when I was like 11 or 12 had a VHS copy of that, and it was like it had been there for years. Like it was. I think it came over like same time as like because Manga Entertainment brought over so much old anime back in the late 80s, early 90s when they were starting to buy up like Harmony Gold and stuff and like some of the other anime distributors. and that was one of the big ones that came through was Vampire Hunter D and Ninja Scroll and a bunch of other like crappy schlock ones like Wicked City and stuff. It's yeah. There's a YouTube channel called Bennett Sage that I watch a lot, and he talks about like the process of like bringing old anime over to the United States, and it's super interesting stuff. Like, for an industry that like was basically a no-go, and like a lot of the catalog is just write-offs for companies from Japan to try and like make back the money they lost on like their Japan releases.
Right.
Super interesting to see how like they affected the cultural landscape and influenced filmmakers like Quentin Tarantino and stuff. Like even if you're like not into nerdy stuff, like it's worth checking out just if you're into like media history.
Yeah, because I was gonna say like around that time, like I got into that stuff. Like I had a dude that lived in our apartment building that had all that and was like, "Oh, check out Ninja Scroll, check out this," and it's like, "What the fuck is this?" And
it's crazy stuff.
Yeah, so I mean, like, and then there just became so much that I was like, I can't keep up with this anymore. There's just too much, and some of it's like really lame to me. Like some of the stuff that's more like, I don't know, like Dragon Ball Z. I know you talked about that earlier, and it's like I try getting into that, and it's just like I'm like, man, I don't get this. It kind of reminds me of like kind of like my disdain for like Final Fantasy. It was like the dude I was talking about earlier, that my friend that passed away. It was like one of his favorite games, that and Street Fighter, and he would play Final Fantasy, and he's like, man, this game's so sweet. I was like, I have a problem with the fact that this game looks fucking sweet in the cutscenes, and then like the game itself looks like shit. And I go, how do you like? It's like they blew their wad on all the cutscenes, and then we're like, well, here's this like 8-bit game. And then on top of that, I was like, I have a hard time believing in the fighting mechanics of someone who's gonna like group up with a bunch of people and then be like, now it's your turn to hit me. I was like, I just think that's weird. And I was like, I understand.
Well, luckily now there's action RPGs, so most games don't have that problem anymore.
Yeah, but
I think it's just like the limitations of the time, and it was like trying to do something different. It was trying to, it's just it was a product of the time, and like some of the games haven't aged well, some have aged really really well, but it all comes down to personal taste. And
one of my favorite games of all time.
Dragon Ball Z.
Actually, that's what I'm gonna do, because I always thought it should have been like an anime, and I feel like it should have been a game that continued on and never got its just due. But I'm gonna play something from the game Parasite Eve.
100p, dude, do it up. That's a great game. I love that game.
That is like my favorite game. Like perfect. Parasite Eve 1 and Parasite Eve 2. Like I thought they were fucking great. Like merging between like the Resident Evil like horror survival stuff going on at the time, and then like kind of a little bit more of like the Final Fantasy style, like with the hit points and all that kind of stuff that was becoming more prevalent in gaming.
It's a tragically underrated game.
It was one of my favorites, and like I got really excited because like where it left off at the end of 2 like left me really excited, and they just never did anything with it. I was almost hoping maybe it'd be like what was the game that just got kickstarted like a couple of years ago? The Asian character.
Oh, like Blood. Mighty Number 9, like
no,
Mega Man sort of thing, or
the last in the series of this game had Jean Reno from The Professional in it.
Oh,
and they
Silent Hill.
No, no, it was a what was this dude? It was a character. It was like a character's name, and that was like the crux of the game was like you're this person. Oh man, I can't remember.
I'm not sure.
But basically they kickstarted and got a new one of those supposedly, and I think it's coming out soonish. But that's my goal, is that eventually someone will give a shit about Resident Evil, Parasite Eve, and make a third one finally, because I bet like on the new consoles it looks sweet. But that's probably never happening. And that's the world I live in.
Yeah, well, what can you do? Anyways, thanks so much for having me, John.
Yeah.
It was awesome to talk to you and talk about video games and music and all the things that us two dudes like.
Not a problem. Hopefully we'll be seeing you guys in the States sometime, maybe either later this year or early next year. Yeah,
I hope we can get out there as soon as possible.
Awesome. Well, safe travels on your upcoming tour, and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Yeah, you too, man.
Oh, I was like, did I cut out again?